to Horsefly Chronicles Radio with Julia and Philip Siracusa, sponsored by Carnation, airing live on the United Public Radio Network on 105.3 FM in New Orleans. This show's entrance has been edited, produced, and directed by Gwen from Perfect Trust Productions, LLC. You can find us at perfecttrustproductions.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday night's segment of Horsefly Chronicles Radio with myself, Julia Siracusa, and Phil Siracusa. We're broadcasting live from the International Public Radio and the United Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 FM from New Orleans. This evening's show is fully sponsored by Carnation, so we want to thank them for their sponsorship. You'll have to do a few things in order to participate. Go over to YouTube channel, UFO Paranormal Radio or International Public Radio. You can also go into all of the Facebook stations, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, UFO Undercover with Joe Montaldo, News on the Flip Side, Twitch, SoundCloud, and Podbean. You can also go over to our group, Horsefly Chronicles Radio. And also, we are live on Roku, which is very exciting. And if you have any questions for our guest tonight, please ask. So, Phil, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good. I feel like you're not in the same house. So, guys, please welcome to the show, DeeDee Moonflyer. DeeDee grew up with very open-minded parents who had many experiences with UFOs and the paranormal. Because of her mom's insistence on exposing her to spiritual classes, meditation, and the teachings of Edgar Casey, DeeDee has a deep interest in the paranormal. Her own paranormal experiences have led her to seek out and interview other fantastic and knowledgeable people in the paranormal on her very own show, Twilight Tonight, on WLTDB.com every Friday night at 6 p.m. So we just want to welcome her to the show, and she will be there. She is.
How are you? Nice to see you in person.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Of course, my pleasure.
We really appreciate it. So, DeeDee, take us from, you got got some bio over here. So take us to the beginning of your story. You know, how was it growing up with parents who really believed in the paranormal and were so really into having you learn about it as well? I mean, not a lot of us have that.
Yeah, I had an amazing mom. My dad was very open-minded too, but my mom was hugely open-minded. I grew up very Catholic for the first 13 years, but my mom studied Edgar Casey, meditation. She was a big believer in UFOs. She saw one when she was pregnant with me.
Wow.
And she's from upstate New York. So I don't know if you guys know where Potsdam is, Lake Placid area, and St. Clair and St. Regis Falls area. She was driving when she was about 7 months pregnant with me. Her and another car pulled over, looked up, and she said it hovered. And
wow.
all through my childhood, we had experiences with these. And yeah. So she was an amazing woman. She never called it paranormal. She called it nature, part of nature. It was part of who and what we were. So I think she did that so I would never be frightened of things I saw.
Right. Wow. And do you think that maybe you guys were seeing so many things because she had experiences of her own? Do you think maybe they were following you kind of?
Well, it is interesting, and I'm coming out more and more and being more open about the things that had happened. And as of course, like everybody else, that's why I started the podcast, so I could be comfortable to talk to people about this and not feel odd about it or there was something wrong with me. I can remember being 4 or 5 and having these visitors in my window of a second-story apartment telling me things about weather patterns.
Wow.
And they look like puppets. So as a child, I thought this was normal. But I also would look down and say to myself, even as like a 5-year-old kid, like, we're in a second story. And these puppets are up here telling me and showing me weather patterns. Now, was it a dream? It sure felt real to me. And it followed me, and they got stronger. And then when we moved to Wadsworth, Ohio, we had an experience where our whole house lit up in the 70s. I think I was in kindergarten, so it had to be 77, around that time period that happened. And
Wow.
she grabbed me and we hid underneath the windowsill. And it continued throughout my adolescence and in my 20s and in my 30s. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know that Phil also has been, had many experiences and
Yeah, when I was 7 years old, I had an encounter. It's funny she said through the window because I remember that through the window.
yeah.
And the being had on a helmet, and he was in a white suit, and he's like, "I can't show you what I look like. I'll scare you." And then he was telling me things through mental telepathy. I was 7 years old in Staten Island, New York. So I do remember that. And I hear these stories every so often, and it makes me feel like some of us um, are being watched and tracked or a part of them. Now, I've talked to people who study ufology and the Galactic Federation, and they go, the reason that certain people are followed or connected to that is because you're part of them. Federation.
sorry about that.
It's amazing. It's very interesting too. I've heard it so many times. Do you feel like you have more of an awareness of nature, the way your mom would put it, because of the encounters?
I think so. I had a definite fear. I think my worst experience was in New York State with them or whatever it was. I was 16 and I was going to bed. And being a 16-year-old up in St. Clair, it was at the time 20 houses. They were all my relatives in one little Catholic church, and the rest, the St. Lawrence River was there. And at night, it was very quiet, very dark. I mean, you could see all the stars. I went to bed, and it must have been about 10 o'clock, and I was wide awake, and I laid down, and all of a sudden, I could not move. And in the corner of the room was a small being coming toward me, and I lost it. It was the first time I actually had seen something like that. I had other experiences prior to that, but not quite as extreme as that one. And I screamed, I got loose, screamed, flew over my mother, basically. And the whole trip was fear-based at night. I had trouble sleeping. I was frightened of these. I looked for them in the daytime. And the only thing as a kid, being 16 back then, you remember Salem's Lot, the bald vampire? It was much smaller, but in my 16-year-old mind, that's what it was. And my mom was like, that's not what that was. I was like, but it reminded me of that. And they were very intrusive, whatever they were, very intrusive.
What do you mean by intrusive?
They would show up and I would just be very frightened, very, very frightened for years of these things. And it got worse in my 20s. And then it died down for a while.
Do they talk to you?
They did, but not as themselves. That was the weird thing that happened throughout my life. I always went to bed like I was being called to bed. Like, I have to go to bed. I have to. No matter what was going on, I had to go to bed. I'd fall into like a sleep and I would see math equations and weather patterns every time, which I thought and still think that's the weirdest thing to see something like that. I'd fall asleep and they'd come, whatever it was, and they always came as my doctor for a long time. Always as my doctor.
Wow.
And that was fascinating because when I was in my 20s, I did lose a child. And I had to have surgeries, but in these particular dreams or whatever they were, I was having surgeries and I could feel pressure, the whole 9 yards. And always at the end, it would be my doctor in a really cold voice saying, "You're going to be okay now. It's done." So with that, I always had my mom to talk to because of her experiences, both, you know, with the creatures or the beings. I call them visitors. And with what people call the paranormal, I always could talk to her. Like, I don't know what just happened. So these were really intense experiences, and they happened when I never expected them. Like, I couldn't plan this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens. It happens when you least expect it.
Yeah. And same thing in our house. My mom was very, very good at communicating with people who had passed over. And, you know, we would see things together. Me and her together saw a lot when I was growing up. We were like each other's best friends in this, because who are you going to talk to? It was the 80s, you know, even though that was becoming more normal, it still was not normal to go out like it is now and go, "I think I've seen a UFO." And people now are more open to it than they were back then. Even when Whitley's book came out, you know, and described what the visitors look like, people were still on edge over that.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, no, those don't exist. You don't see little green men. You don't see any of that. That's just there's something wrong with you." And as you know, with your guys' experiences, how that feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the 80s. I mean, I had a lot of similar experiences to what you're saying. And it's like, you know, as you get older, you don't try to prove anything. If you're open-minded and can understand what we're talking about, it's great. If not, especially back in the day, it was hard. You tell you know, people that, "Oh, I seen a UFO." Who's going to believe you? "I seen
really
it go." You know, today it's more, yeah.
Yeah, I seen that book lift up, you know. They're like, "No, you didn't." I was like, "Yes, we did." We've seen, you know, I think thanks to shows like this and even TV shows, I think people are becoming more and more vocal about what has happened to them.
Yes.
So I find that very interesting.
Well, if you really think about it, we're never taught anything unless, like you said, you have parents that were into the paranormal and seen UFOs and whatnot, but you're not taught anything, you know, especially when you go to school, and no one believes it, so no one teaches it because no one understands it, right? Me, personally, I'm a hands-on person. If I don't see it, I don't believe it. I don't read about it. I want to see it. I want to experience it. That's how my life has always been. You know, and I can tell, you know, and for some people still have closed minds and say, "Oh, aliens don't exist," or they do, but can't prove it, you know, unless they want to prove it to you, you know. I don't think there's a reason for them to prove it either. Some of us have that connection to them. I don't think it sounds like what you were getting was downloads of information, weather patterns and numbers. I've heard of this before. It's like the movie Knowing with Christopher, what's his name? No, Nicolas Cage.
I didn't think of that. I hope not.
mathematical formulas and everything. You better let us know if the world's coming to an end soon.
And the funny thing is I'm more frightened of them. So withholding that information didn't happen. Like I remember actually running out of the room because then it almost was like night terrors for a long time. And I remember running out of the house and my husband's best friend caught me before I flew off of the steps off the front porch. And so it was more frightening for me because I didn't like the idea of not being able to move is the first thing. And they call it sleep paralysis. And I thought for years, maybe I'm just having night terrors or sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
So, but they had a different, a pattern to them.
Probably so many kids back in that time, the 70s and the 80s, this is probably was, it could have been happening to them. And, they didn't know it. Their parents, just probably believed they were having bad dreams.
Sure.
Sad.
Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because when you talk to people that have these experiences, everybody has very similar experiences, including seeing people that they know with really cold voices, time loss. Now, to my knowledge, I've never had the time loss that some people have had.
Yeah.
But my husband got really, really obsessed with UFOs for a short time when it was very active out of the blue. He read all the books he could, and we really didn't discuss it very much. But then he got very obsessed. So I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's how this kind of works too. Do you ever find yourself just getting so many people they get so obsessed with just like the whole UFOs and paranormal, so it becomes, who do we have on our show that I think said that, something like that? You get an obsession, like an obsession.
Yeah. And I got so busy at a certain point in my life, I tried to shut everything down.
Yeah.
Because being a professional dancer, I traveled, and I just was so busy, and on purpose, I shut everything down.
You have to block it off, because if you don't, it becomes too much. I want to say hi to Robert White. He is in chat. Hello, how are you tonight? Yeah, you're also a professional dancer. I mean, how did this all start from you?
As a child, I was obsessed with dance. I was very dyslexic. I am very dyslexic. I'm very open about that. And in school, I couldn't do school, obviously, but I could do one thing. I could dance. So I was obsessed. Even as a kid, I would practice dance 4 hours a day from second grade up. I'd come home and I would dance. And I ended up taking lessons in the Dayton Ballet, and my parents just ran out of money. It was so expensive. And then I saw a TV show, National Geographic, about a dancer named Lucy, a belly dancer at 14. And I became obsessed with not just the dance, the people, the music. And then I became a professional belly dancer for 30 years.
Wow.
So I traveled, I danced and performed and taught in Turkey. I did Egyptian weddings. I did all kinds of stuff. It was my love. It was part of my livelihood. I taught at a college for 20 years.
Wow, so exciting.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So let's talk about your radio show. You are such an amazing host. I mean, so many of us go into, radio because of what we've been through. I think that's been your experience too. I mean, you must have met so many people, and how did this all start?
Well, I have two shows. I have Twilight Tonight with Todd Bates, which I love working with him.
Yes,
and then I have Twilight Tonic Paranormal Podcast.
Okay.
I retired from dance, and I always was interested in podcasting for about 10 years. The first podcast I heard 10 years ago was Jim Harold. And I became obsessed. I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I retired from dance, and you go through all those emotions of taking 30 years of your life and trying to develop something else that's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
Because dance is all consuming. It's very ethereal, and your soul expresses. I didn't know what to do with myself, you know. It was like, so I looked at my husband, who's a rock musician most of his life, and I go, I want a podcast. And he looks at me very puzzled. What about? And I go, well, I know there's more people that have experiences like I've had. I want a paranormal podcast. So next thing I know, he brings home a Zoom, sets it on the table, and I'm podcasting.
Wow.
Scared to death. I'm scared to death. I can't handle to listen to my voice. So yeah, 2 years. It would be 2 years this year.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's
You learn a
amazing.
lot when you interview a lot of people, and you realize that
Yeah.
so many
Not
people
everyone.
have experiences
Yeah.
like yourself, and you're like,
Absolutely.
well, I'm not alone. No one's going to
Mm-mm.
talk about it on the news. They're not going to say ghosts are real and aliens are real, even though the sightings are starting to show now. But, you know,
Yeah.
you talk to people who experience this stuff, myself, my wife, yourself, and so many people, and professional athletes and celebrities and all
Very
walks of life.
well-respected
And you'd be
people.
surprised that it's such a wide, broad spectrum that is unexplainable, but yet it's true within our reality. And
Yeah.
we take this and we learn from it and share that knowledge, right, with other people that are going through similar things, that you're not alone.
Yeah. Exactly. And it makes you feel better. It doesn't make you feel like you're in this small
It
bubble.
does. It does. It makes you feel like, you're not alone, and there's other people going through this, and it's hard on their families or children, and it's really good to have, the outlet that we have, that we can talk to people going through the same things we are. And it always
Oh,
starts when you're a
absolutely.
child, right? It always starts when you're young and you're a kid.
Yeah. And when you're a kid, it's almost normal
Yeah.
because kids have that open heart and open mind. And my mom said she'd come in the room, and I had a thing for my rosaries when I was a kid. I loved rosaries, and I'd sleep with them. I had them on me all the time. And she said she would walk in the room and the rosary'd slide across the dresser. And as a kid, I didn't see that.
Wow.
You know, I thought I was playing.
Right.
I didn't know. I thought that was normal. But it was my mother that probably instilled that in me, so I would not be frightened.
Okay. Now, was your house, obviously your house had activity.
Mhm.
Do you know what was there in the childhood home?
Well, we moved quite a bit. My father was transferred a lot. So in Wandsworth, I think there was something in the house, but it didn't affect me. I would always see one person a lot when I was a kid, and I think it belonged with my mother, and that was a guy that he looked like he was from the 30s, dressed with the hat and stuff, and he would always watch over my mother.
Okay.
I always saw him quite a bit. And I would also see people walk in and out of the houses because we also lived in several apartment complexes. So quite often I would just see somebody walk by and didn't think about it. Now, when I was older, both of my houses had somebody in it. The first house when I was married, I called him the kitchen ghost because every time I cooked, if I made chili or homemade spaghetti sauce, lasagna, something that took a long time to cook, he would peek around the corner from the basement. And all my friends would see him. He had curly hair, dark, And if I was slow cooking something, that little bugger, he'd just peek around the corner real fast. Only when I was cooking. Only. So, and we adored him because we called him, the kitchen ghost. He liked to eat.
Yeah.
The second house drove us all nuts.
Yeah.
It would always sound like someone would open the door, come in, walk across. The dogs would acknowledge it. There was nobody there. And the basement had something that would chase you up the steps. The interesting thing, 6 months before my brother died, we had the doorbell ring. We had the garage door open at 3 a.m, and it sounded like someone was coming up to the bedroom, like running, to the point my husband would grab something to hit somebody. And that subsided after my brother passed. So I think something was trying to tell us something, we weren't listening the way it thought, so it was going to extremes. The door and the walking across the room continued, and the chasing up the steps continued in that house. And that was in Ohio. That was in Dayton. Here, we have a ghost kitty.
Oh.
And that's it. The house is very happy. It's very settled. Nothing bothers us. And if it does, it's a walkthrough.
Okay.
So it's less stressful for me now.
So you basically can see, I mean, everywhere that you've lived, you've basically saw something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that stems from childhood,
Yeah.
It's okay if you see that. It's nothing. It's okay.
I mean, I know that you had your mom, but did you ever tell any of your friends the things that were going on?
Yeah. That's when it got complicated because kids don't understand.
Yeah.
And I learned to be quiet very quickly, I think because I was so dyslexic. I was picked on.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn to be more quiet. And I think you also will develop different abilities when you have dyslexia because you have to read the room really well. You have to be able to pick up on what people are thinking to survive.
Yes. It makes
so I think that's what happens.
Yep. That's crazy. Let me see. I think if I can see this. It gives validation that you are not going crazy. Robert White said, yes, it definitely does, Robert. Get validation.
I'm interested in the kitchen ghost.
Oh, he was so great. I loved him.
I knew you could say that. I mean, if there's going to be a kitchen ghost, they should, help out with everything, like the cooking and the cleaning and all that fun stuff.
He just wanted to smell, I think.
Yeah.
He was, it was so funny. One of my girlfriends that's really close, her name's Julie, and she'd come over and she would see him. She'd like, oh God. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
She goes, what is that peeking around the corner? I said, oh, that's the kitchen ghost.
That's the best part. Like when your friends can see it too, because I had a ghost in my house, childhood home, and Phil knows he had a hat. There's always that hat man. I don't know why. Everybody has a story about a hat man. And he always had a hat on. He was not nice. But there have been times that a couple of friends have seen him. And I don't think they really ever came back.
And that's validation, that's good for us to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. It really
because
is.
even where you guys live, you guys see things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. I'm in the actual room where the activity is.
Every time you turn your head, I'm like, oh no, what is he looking at?
I'm in the actual room. Yeah. No joke. Like this is the room. But it's interesting, there's kitchen ghosts and loved ones. I mean, have you ever spoke to someone that crossed over, that a grandparent or uncle or?
In dreams I do. When my brother died, I had a continuous dream for about 3 months that we would be walking around the block where I lived. It would be my dad, me, and him. and the wind would be blowing. It was continuous dream. And finally in the dream, he turned around and he said, I didn't commit suicide, but this is what it felt like. And in that dream, he took his hand and hit my chest. And it was like I was yanked and pulled. And it was like a roller coaster ride for a brief moment. And then I felt, and he told me he did not commit suicide. It was accidental.
Oh,
wow.
After that happened, it was really interesting because he started to get younger in my dreams. And then we were in the old apartment where we were teenagers, and he would cry on my shoulder. And then as soon as he got younger, like in his 20s, the dreams became less and he left. So in a dream state, I do. If they're walkthroughs and they have something to say, it's usually a feeling I get. And then I will hear them sometimes. But sometimes I tell them to leave because I'm not ready to talk to them.
Yeah.
It's like, there's the door. You cannot stay. I don't want you to stay. You didn't come with the house. You have to leave.
Do you ever have dreams where there's people in your dreams that you feel like you know, but you kind of like don't know? Things like that?
Yeah. I think everybody, because we're so open in our sleep. And I think some people work spiritually in their sleep too with others sometimes, because we're so open and they can communicate with us much better. At least that's how I feel.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they can be themselves without the hard work of appearing. I think for them to show themselves physically, I think is probably a lot of energy for them.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree. The dream state, especially for myself too, they come through. Loved ones come through, and when you're at the relaxed state and you go out to the astral plane, the spirit realm, there's an easier connection there. And it's great because, you know, you can make contact with loved ones. You know, I believe what you're saying, like your brother, that's a spiritual connection. He's showing you something. He's telling you something.
Absolutely.
And that's the best way of communication, right?
Yeah. And we were very close. So those dreams, I couldn't wait to go to sleep to see him.
Wow.
You know, I'd be like, oh, yay.
Yeah.
That was nice. Now I don't see him, and once in a while he'll make an appearance, but it's very brief.
Yeah. But that, so, and you said like when you were in your 20s, it kind of like slowed down, right?
Yeah. The younger he got.
Yeah, that's always puzzled me. That's happened to me too. Like once I started getting older, I wouldn't have dreams of loved ones anymore. I wonder why that is. Very strange.
I think I know when I'm not stressed and caught up in things, our abilities, I think, are more available to us.
Yeah.
And when we're stressed, it's kind of like you're like this the whole time.
Yeah.
And you cannot relax.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So you're saying like when we get older, we get stressed out and lives and everybody's busy and yeah, it makes sense. Phil, are you okay down there?
I'm fine. I'm listening.
I'm like, is it there?
Just make sure you're by yourself.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, but the dream state I love, like, you know, you said you couldn't wait to go to, I up until this day, I have spirit beings in my dreams that some I don't even know, and then some loved ones come through, and it's fascinating. That's a good way of communication. Songs are a good way of communication, music. Thinking about those that crossed over and then bringing them in through vibration of music that they used to like is another way of form of validation too. But it's important out there for the listener, because in these hard times, we're all losing people we love. And, you know, I tell people that, yes, you can communicate. You may not see them physically anymore, of course, but the spiritual part of them and your spirit part still connect.
Mm-hmm.
So when you leave the physical emotions behind and you cross over and want to connect spiritually, that's the best way to do it. And then you can get that validation and communication with the other side. And having said that now, it's such an open topic of, you have different planes of loved ones, and then we have aliens, and then we have demons, and then we have angels. There's just so much going on. And if you really think about it, we're on a little rock in the middle of nowhere, the Earth, right? In the middle of nowhere, in a galaxy of nowhere. So who are we to say truly that we're alone and we know everything, because the truth is we don't.
Right.
There's just so much more out there that we don't know. We're a grain of sand. That's all we are. That's all the Earth is.
Mm-hmm.
In the big scope of things, it's a grain of sand. So then that would tell you that how many grains of sands are out there.
Mm-hmm.
How many other
Exactly.
planets of other life forms are out there and that do exist. And people who have these encounters, I believe that there's another Earth, very similar to ours, a bigger one. I don't know why I believe it, but I believe it to be true, that we're not the only ones like us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it almost would be an injustice to think we're the only ones in the universe. I think it would be a huge injustice. And whatever the visitors are, and I tend to call my experience visitors. I don't know if they're dimensional or from another planet.
Right.
All I know is something happened. And I can't explain it. And to this day, even as a little kid, I look back, looking down at that window going, how are you up here? How are you suspended? And it just wasn't a child's imagination. That was so real and so different. I definitely believe, yeah, we just cannot be alone in the universe. We're not just the piece of glitter. There's thousands of other kinds of glitter out there.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I agree. Have you ever had an encounter where you felt uneasy, where maybe something
Absolutely.
felt unfriendly?
I lived in Texas, in Austin. I was 19 at the time, and we went from Austin to the ocean, Galveston. And there was a patch, almost desert-like. And we were coming back from the ocean back to Austin. And the person I was with at the time knew. He was always uneasy certain times of the night. Sometimes when I would say, I just don't feel right, something's going to happen. And we were in the car and we pulled over, and it was a desert type area. There's no one around. All of a sudden I sat up and I was like, we got to go. And I'd never been so frightened in my life. I said, whatever it is, it's coming and it's going to get me. We've got to go. And I started crying. I begged him. I said, we've got to leave here. Something's going to happen. Finally, he drove and he goes, you're scaring me. I'm like, I'm scared to death. And we finally found a town. I needed to get out of that desert. I don't know what was going to happen, but I felt like they were coming because there was nobody around and I was frightened. But there were times I remember in my 20s being extremely frightened of what was going to be. And I could sense them better than coming in and out. Now, if I see a bird outside at night, it is the usual. I have a thing for owls ever since I was a little girl. I love owls. And I've seen owls in my window several times throughout my adult life from 16 on. But if I hear a bird, see a bird, I have birds, as you know, but the outside birds, I know something, and that frightens me. And it happens less since I'm older now. And I don't want to say this, but I wonder if childbearing years, they're around you more than not childbearing years. And I've always questioned that, because as soon as I hit 40, it became less and less and less of experiences.
Wow.
Now they're having every so often. And I
Yeah.
can sense them now more than I could then.
That's
So
funny that you said that, because for me, it's the other way around. It was like,
you have
you know,
more
I got
visitors
so-
now.
Yeah, I was so tormented that I kind of like blocked off until I probably hit like my early 40s, and then it was just like boom. So it was strange how it works.
It's interesting because it happens to so many people. Like, I've run into more people recently than I thought I would, saying, yeah, I think something did happen, but I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody's becoming more open to now. It's just, I don't know what's going on, but there's so many people that are really opening up to their gifts more now than ever before.
Yeah, I would believe it's a spiritual awakening. It's a universal cosmic view where people are being awakened. The spirit mind is being awakened, and the souls. And then you can see everything for what it really is, especially, unfortunately, all the chaos around the entire globe. And it makes you wonder if our demise is around the corner. You know, the way things look and the way things are prospering right now. In your belief and what you know and your encounters, in your thought process, when we die, where do you think we go?
I'm a real big believer in reincarnation and lessons. I believe no matter what religion you are, if it's for a better good, you're welcomed. And I think we move on. I think we come back again until we don't come back again. So that's what I believe. I believe in the afterlife. I study the goddess religions now. I'm really heavy into that, but I believe one good source, we all go to a good source. I not just my belief system, but I don't think we die. Absolutely not. And I believe in reincarnation deeply.
Oh, I do too. Well, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right? You know, and the spirit one time said through, it might have been a spirit box or some kind of device. They said, I was asking, what's it like to die? And they go, cut a fingernail off and throw it out in the garbage. And I was trying to make sense out of it. It's just a little piece of you. We're in a shell. They're trying to explain that it's a shell. You walk out of the shell. The spirit body. It's all it is. So they were trying to say, well, just like a fingernail, just cut it off and you just keep going. You know, you just walk out of that spirit body. And I do believe in reincarnation because, you know, talking about aliens, I've also had an encounter. I had a few encounters, and a lot of this stuff is hard for people to grasp, but I remember at 14 years old, Staten Island, New York, I was a nice summer day and about 50 kids out in the neighborhood playing football, baseball, and I'm in the middle of the street. It's a great time, and I'm stopped through a form of telepathy. And this being came through, and I couldn't move. I was like frozen, but not ice. I was just like a form of paralysis. And through a telepathy, the being was saying, are you having a good time in your life? And I talked through my mind, says yes. And I knew the voice. It sounded like a very authoritative 20-year-old with a lot of authority, but not from this physical realm. And he goes, good, because this is where you will wind up when your life journey is complete. And I was released. And that's in my book, and I've talked about this on numerous shows. And what I could tell the people out there, and you talk about reincarnation and karmic view, I believe what he was trying to tell me was, when I cross over, I'm going to wind up at that exact spot at that exact time, and everything is going to exist the exact same way that it did. And it's hard to comprehend because we think of things, we're boxed into, well, we have to go here or there when you cross over. He was trying to tell me something. You have to redo it.
Yeah.
You have to redo starting at that age again.
Yeah.
At that
We have
you have to re-go
Bill.
again. Huh?
Wait, we have a question that has to do with that. Robert White said, was it like being stopped by a brick wall? I guess like when you stopped and you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And what this being, this higher being, this interdimensional being was trying to say is, it's a karmic tide. You've made mistakes. You got to start over again. And then, well, you know, and it's so crazy to think about the possibilities of that. But when we think about the Mandela effect and how some of us think some things were a way and others say, nope, it wasn't that way, like logos and cartoons and labels.
Right.
That is telling me that we go on different dimensions without even realizing it. So I think what this being was trying to say is draw a circle of an earth. Now draw another circle and another circle outside of that circle. You're just going through dimensions.
That would make sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend that was in the military and I asked him about UFOs. He goes, nothing space and interdimensional beings that can do that. I would like to know why we're always feeling paralyzed when they're around.
Huh.
That's very uncomfortable to me.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable, but it seems like they're giving you some kind of a download of information at the same time, because maybe that's the only way they can download the information into us. Now, I'm going to tell the listener out there, UFOs are real. You know, and it was just a big controversy. No, they're demons. Well, demons don't build spaceships. Sorry. And it's all over the news. NASA has it. Military sees these crafts. We cannot explain it. It's not a foreign adversary because that technology goes way back to the 40s. So we didn't even have that stuff going around, that they can do these dimensional shifts in time with these crafts. Above water and below water, it's impossible. Therefore, it always was. And if it always was, then these are maybe what the Egyptians talked about, the gods. When the Great Pyramids were built, the gods, they've had help, they've had knowledge. We still cannot build a pyramid today. We can't do that pyramid.
Same thing with the Aztecs.
So you got to think about it. If we can't do that today, and we can't, then who's to say that we're the most advanced species on the earth?
No, we're not. Look at all the chaos we do. We're not.
It's true. Whoa, we are our worst enemy.
Yeah, I mean, we're very destructive. And I think they're trying to warn us.
Yeah.
You know, I really do. I don't think it's all. And it's been a message over and over to many people. You know, they're trying to help us. They're trying to do this or doing that. Weather patterns, that could have been a warning to global warming.
Yeah.
I mean, as a kid, I didn't know what that was about. And I don't think any kid would at the time. But now I look back on it and you think about it. Why would they show you weather patterns or whatever it was? And I'm not claiming I have the answers, but it's undescribable, the feeling, as you guys know, to be in that position where you can't move and you're stuck. It feels like you're stuck and you have to listen and you have to participate whether you want to or not.
Yes.
You know,
that's a really good way of putting it. You have to participate if you want to or not. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why
I believe it's downloading information. That's the way I would perceive it as, through my experience, and a lot of testimonies out there of people who are brought back into a form of a state where, you know, they brought back in time through a mental transition. Where were you? What happened? And what information were you getting from whoever? And you know, let's talk about Edgar Casey, right?
Mm-hmm.
He worked for the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was known as the sleeping prophet as well. He did some amazing predictions.
And this is going back to like the well, he was born in the 1800s, correct? Like we're going back.
I know he was around in the 30s.
Okay.
And the foundation was built in Virginia. It's in Virginia. I do know that. And I guess, I know he did work with the government at some point, but people would seek him out for healing, for illnesses. He predicted World War II and III.
And III.
So, yeah. But we have choices.
Yeah.
He even said we have choices, which hopefully we're making the right ones. Hopefully, because I do not want to live through a world war. Not with the technology we have now. That would not be fun.
No.
You know, World War I, World War II were bad.
Yeah. And
I don't want to be obliterated. And maybe that's why they're visiting more. You know, trying to stop us from our own destruction.
Yeah, because that's true. Because, you know, you hear about they see them hovering over our nucleus sites. They're able to shut it down, which was testified about a year ago. It was all over the news. Something shut the nucleus sites down in the United States. We don't know what it was. So maybe they try to protect us in such a way, you know, because let's face it, if there was a World War III, nothing exists. Yeah. That's it. That's it. Nothing. That's the end of mankind.
Yeah. So yeah, that whole prospect always makes me nervous. I don't even like talk about it. I don't want to put that energy out there into the world.
No.
I don't.
Yeah.
No. But what I can tell people is this: through my knowledge and through knowing that ghosts and spirits and entities and there's so many different realms, the physical part may not exist, but the part of you always exists. I asked a psychic one time, many, many years ago, I said, well, if the earth was blown up, would the earth still exist? And the answer is yes. And the answer is yes, because you made the earth exist, because nothing is solid. We're all energy. And we're vibrating on such a high frequency that you created everything through a consciousness. So we're all collective consciousness, each and every one of us borrowing a suit. And the suit is the shell that we're in.
Yeah.
And it's what you create when you go over. And I think that some of this information that beings try to tell us, we should take it and write it down because it's factual information, what they're trying to say. Now, again, are there malevolent aliens? I've heard of that. I have never experienced anything like that. You know, some people say that they walk amongst us. Some people say that they look just like us, which would make me think that we're being duplicated in such a way.
Yeah.
And if you have that technology to fly those crafts the way you do since the 1940s, then you have that technology to recreate us.
Right. It's really interesting because I've heard a couple speakers say that they're drawn to us because of what we are, our belief systems, how we die and we continue. Now, whether that's true or not, and I thought that was so interesting the way they said that they're interested in our spirituality, that when we die, our energy carries on.
Oh, okay.
So when I heard that kind of made me perk up, because maybe in their dimension, maybe they just don't believe in that, or they don't understand that.
Wow.
So I thought that was a really interesting thought too that someone put out there. And a scary one in a way, you know. Weigh my options here.
And let me see if we can get to one more. I think that they got it right in the Matrix movies where they say humans are a virus. Hey. Maybe.
We are in a lot of ways. Nature might say we are.
I kind of agree with what he's saying.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Man. Well,
the
thank
woods,
you
the forest.
All your questions. I mean, yeah, definitely.
The elementals might come out and say we are. Yeah.
Fascinating such. There's such a broad topic of so many different areas of learning and discovery. And what we do know is that spirits do exist.
Yep.
We exist on multiple levels of dimensions, whether we realize it or not, and we probably don't even realize it. It's fascinating. And some people believe that when you die, you wake up. That's a big belief. When we die, we wake up, actually, because right now we're sleeping. That's a big belief.
And then you end up with more questions, right? More questions and more questions.
Yeah, I do believe we have.
Get into the animals, how funny they're acting lately, right?
Yeah.
The outside animals, even inside, all the animals. Just, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, that makes me sad because I'm real connected to animals. I have 5. I have my bird, my 2 dogs, my cat, another bird. But yeah, animals, they know something's going on. The earth is changing. Look what just happened in Turkey.
Very sad. And our hearts and prayers go out to the people in Turkey and Syria. It's very hard. In fact, all over the world, all these catastrophes happening, it's, there are no words. We could just put out prayers and energy and then try to help people in the best ways that we can going through this. Very, very sad. We're coming to the end of the show. So I want you to tell our listener out there, give them some words of inspiration on paranormal and the belief that you have.
I have one word to say, acceptance. You have to accept who you are, and you have to accept what is around you. It's just part of us, and if we're open, you'll receive the messages you need. You don't need to be frightened. Please don't be frightened. Talk to other people. Talk to Julia, talk to Phil, communicate with me.
Yes.
Mediums and readers are willing to help if they're the legit. They will help you. And you have nothing to fear. This is why we all do this. We're here to help.
Yes.
Yep.
Definitely.
Where can people find you?
Oh gosh, I'm so easy. Facebook, Instagram, DeeDee Moonflyer, SoundCloud. My shows are on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Apple. And my email address is boxingswan@gmail, BOXINGSWAN @gmail. And my website will be up really soon.
Awesome. I was on your show. I had a great time. You're a great host. And I know Julia and I think we're going back on to your show.
Yeah. You're going to be on my live show, Twilight Tonight. I'm really looking forward because you guys are amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Come on. Thank you so much. And that was a beautiful ending to the show. Thank you.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
All right. Well, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening tonight. Special thank you to Carnation for fully sponsoring the show. We love them. They've been sponsoring Horsefly Chronicles Radio from day one. Please join us next Monday night at the same time on the United Public Radio Network on 105.3 FM from New Orleans. And don't forget, we're on the Roku channel now, too, as well. Stay tuned for Trish Moe with The Missing Piece.
Awesome. Everyone have a safe, great night. And keyword, believe. Thank you.